Okay. Good afternoon. This is the July 14th, 2020 regular City Council meeting. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that Councilmember Duffield has an excused absence.
Okay, we're going to have the invocation by Councilmember Herdman, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Avery. Please stand.
Please join me by bowing your head. Dear Lord, work alongside us this evening as we do the work of the people. Guide us in the decision-making process to make decisions that will be a benefit to the community at large. Bless those who come before us for their wisdom and their thoughtful input, and continue to watch over our city. And a special prayer to be with those who, and provide peace and comfort to those who have lost loved one, friends, co-workers to this coronavirus. We pray these things in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk.
The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items.
Thank you. Now is the time for City Council announcements and oral reports from City Council on committee activities, which would also be the time if you'd like an A1 in the next meeting. All right, we'll start from left to right. Ms. Brenner.
Good evening. Thank you. I met with the CDM Residents Association Historical Subcommittee a couple of times over the last 2 weeks and got updates on various aspects of their activities. Tim Heatherton from the library, along with Arts Commissioner Chair Arlene Greer, came and attended this meeting and talked about how the Arts Commission can enhance these efforts and work with us. The Oral History Subcommittee, made up of Ron Yo, Walt and Karen Howell, B.J. Johnson, Tony Van Schultz, Ed Olin, and I also met with Jim Woods, who was the founder of Coast Magazine and has relocated to the Bay Area, but he made a trip down and brought a great many old pieces of memorabilia that we have passed on to Paul Wormser at Sherman Gardens. And I also met with a group of CDM residents and Dave Webb and other public works officials above China Cove, because we have saved some money in this cycle for extending the sidewalk above China Cove so that when cars come up the ramp, they have a chance to flatten out before they're making a turn there, because it was pretty dangerous. And over the weekend, I was going through old files, and I found a file from 1988 when my dear friend Phil Sansone was the District 6 representative to the City Council. And in this file, they were talking about extending the sidewalk along above Ocean Boulevard there near China Cove. And I thought, boy, it really does take bureaucracy a long time to work. So we're finally going to do that mission from 1988.
There you go. Mr. Herdman.
I'm a trustee on the Vector Control Board here in Orange County, and I got a report from the director a couple of days ago. We do continue to meet. We're meeting by Zoom, and we do hold board meetings every month. There have been 5 mosquitoes trapped and identified in the county that carry the West Nile virus, and the ankle biter, called the ankle biter, I can't remember the scientific name for this mosquito, is very active in our area right now. The Big Canyon area is being treated. I believe it was yesterday and today. And then another area of our city, I believe it's actually Big Canyon itself, is also being treated with spray. I've never had a mosquito bite on the bottom of my foot, but I actually have one. And it's quite painful, and it's from an ankle biter. And I called Vector Control, and they're coming out to my house tomorrow to set some traps. And that is available to every single one of you who are watching and those of you who are listening. Just a simple phone call. If you're having trouble with them at your home, that can be scheduled. Councilmember Muldoon and myself and Councilmember Dixon met with ACI Jet, who submitted a proposal for the General Aviation Improvement Program. We got a sneak preview of their plan. And then our short-term lodging ad hoc committee has continued to meet and work up until last week. So that's about it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just carrying on those announcements, I am co-chair of the Aviation Committee, chaired by Mr. Herdman, and the subcommittee to review the General Aviation Improvement Plan for John Wayne Airport is now been convened, and we are going to be working over the next 2 weeks to review the proposals that have come in from the various applicants. And so the series of meetings are being set as I speak. And we'll be bringing in the RFP respondents to the GAP program, and we will have a recommendation to the full Aviation Committee at its meeting on July 27th. This is the goal, in turn to present to the City Council for a recommendation. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us. Also, I have 2 A1 items. One is I have a proposed resolution I'd like to bring before my colleagues in support of our Newport Beach Police Department, public safety in our community. They've been working hard for us for years, but specifically during the COVID and during our various increased activity throughout our city regarding visitors in our city and just a lot going on in beach activity. I'd like to take time to recognize their outstanding contributions to our quality of life. That's one A1, and then the second A1 would be, maybe I need the city attorney's opinion. Is there an opportunity for us to look further into the Ensign Intermediate School activities? I'd like to discuss this as a council. Is there further action we can take, given some recent issues related to their EIR?
That might be more appropriate for a closed session. So maybe that's something we can talk about offline.
Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, Mr. Muldoon. Mr. Avery. Let's see, just a couple. So the first Housing Subcommittee meeting was finally convened. So it convened right before the 4th of July. They have their second meeting tomorrow in the chambers here. On July 6th, we observed Ben Carlson Day down at 17th Street. I'm sorry, at 17th Street. And just want to say thank you to all the lifeguards and alums who were there. Speak Up Newport was a good presentation from our finance director and our city manager. Thank you for that. And in a preview of Monday, I'd like to say happy birthday to our council member, Jeff Herdman. So, your past birthdays. Well, I'm pretty sure the mayors are supposed to remember these things, so it's a preview. Anyway, we'll move into public comments, or we'll move into the consent calendar, Madam Clerk.
This is the time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 1 through 12. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each item for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
All right, since we didn't have a study session for clarification, I'm just going to let everyone know, unless it's pulled, so if item number 3 dealing with the short-term lodging is pulled, it wouldn't be the same thing. But if it's not pulled and it gets to me, I'm just going to let everyone know. I'm going to ask our city attorney to just kind of clarify what item number 3 is, because based on some of the public comments we've received, it seems that there was a bit of confusion about what item 3 was. If council members would like to actually discuss that, it'll need to get pulled. But I would just tell you, I'm going to ask for a little bit of legal clarification on what a second reading is and what the scope of that item is. Because like I said, I think there was some confusion around what that is. So anyway, with that being said, Councilmember Brenner.
No, but I have to be recused on item 6 because of real property interest.
Okay. Mr. Herdman. Okay. Ms. Dixon.
Yes, I'd like to pull item 12, please.
Okay. Item 12. Okay. Mr. Muldoon?
Yes, I have quite a few. My apologies. A no on item 3, the second reading. A no on modified start time, not because I'm concerned about attendance, but because I find that a lot of times these meetings go longer when we start sooner, with less urgency. I'd like to lodge a conflict in item number 6 due to wireless component part of the park. I'd like to lodge a conflict in item 9. Could impact a potential business transaction that I began discussions on last week. That is it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Avery? All right. I'm going to lodge a no vote on items 8 and 9. All right. And then, as promised, I'd like to ask for a bit of a clarification from our city attorney on item number 3. Specifically, could you explain to members of the public what a second reading is? And then also, I believe that there is some confusion over what the scope of this particular provision is. So if you wouldn't mind taking both of those, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor O'Neill. The short-term lodging ordinance is here tonight in front of the City Council for a second reading, primarily because the charter requires that ordinances be considered twice by the council before they're adopted. Now, this ordinance is primarily focused on good neighbor policies and is not intended to ban short-term rentals in any way. Before I summarize the ordinance, let me first take a moment to clarify what is not in the ordinance. Previously, when this item was presented to the City Council, there was some discussion about limiting the total number of short-term lodging permits issued by the city, eliminating the short-term lodging permits outside of the coastal zone, requiring all short-term lodging permit holders to have a parking place, requiring a minimum night stay for short-term rentals, limiting the total number of guests who could stay in a short-term unit to 2 per bedroom plus 2, and requiring exterior signage on all short-term units. Now, none of these proposed regulations that were previously discussed by the City Council are in this ordinance. And I'd like to repeat, there's no cap, there's no elimination of short-term lodging permits, there's no requirement there would be a parking place to have a short-term lodging, there's no minimum night rental in this ordinance, there's no maximum occupancy load, and there's no requirement for exterior signage. So I think it's important to clarify what's not in the ordinance. What is in front of the council for consideration this evening is primarily focused on ensuring that short-term rentals coexist with their neighbors so both residents and renters can enjoy Newport Beach. Specifically, the ordinance would require the posting of information in short-term lodging units so that the short-term lodging guests know the number and location of parking places on the premises, the street sweeping schedule, who could they get in contact if they have a problem, information about how to be a good neighbor and what is expected from short-term renters, and a copy of local laws related to trash, gatherings, and noise. The ordinance would also prohibit renting to people under 21 because there are more parties and disturbances associated with younger renters. The ordinance would require the owner to submit a plan for how they would handle short-term guests who cause a disturbance and to have someone within 25 miles to address those problems. The ordinance would require posting of the permit number on all advertisements so the city can identify illegal rentals. And finally, it would have provisions which would allow the city to work with online hosting platforms to remove rentals that do not have short-term lodging permits. So in sum, this ordinance is not designed to prohibit short-term rentals, but it's designed to ensure that everyone can enjoy Newport Beach. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. I appreciate that. So what we're going to do now is, actually, I should probably take the motion first. I know it's complicated. So why don't you go with the motion, and then we can go out to public comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the balance of the consent calendar items 1 through 12, with the exception of item 12 pulled by Councilmember Dixon, with recusals from Council members Muldoon on items 6 and 9, and Councilmember Brenner on item 6. And we have just one amendment. We have an amendment on item 1, the minutes. And we have a no vote on item 4 from Councilmember Muldoon, and no vote on items 8 and 9 by the mayor.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. He did, yeah. So there's also a no vote from Councilmember Muldoon on item number 3.
Okay.
All right. So
Okay.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is go out to public comment. Just to be clear for everyone, if you're listening, if the only item from the consent calendar that has been pulled is item number 12, so if you'd like to speak to any of the consent calendar items, including the short-term lodging one, now would be the time. So I see, all right. So just to be clear, is that Gary Sherwin out there? All right. Just to be clear, item 12 has been pulled, so if you're coming to speak on that one. No, okay. All right. Okay, we'll go out to public comment.
Or comment on this one.
Sorry, so I'm just saying, if you're going to speak to item 12, that's been pulled, and it'll be discussed at a separate time.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Mayor, I dropped the flash drive off. I don't know if that's applicable to what I'm speaking about with Jennifer. Can we pull that up?
Is this, so what you're going to do, sir, I know what you're going to speak to because I've seen the printout.
Right.
So what you're going to speak to is non-agenda items. So
Correct.
I'll make sure, so that'll come after we discuss.
Oh, well,
That's okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I'll make sure to let you know when it's time for.
Yeah, just call my name and that'll make it easy for everybody.
What's your name, sir?
Craig Sheets.
All right, Craig, I'll make sure you know.
Thank you.
Mayor O'Neill, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosher. I have 2 consent calendar items I would like to speak on. First is number 3, the short-term rental ordinance. I am wondering why we are, without discussion, changing the definition of a short-term lodging. Up until 2010, it was understood that a short-term lodging was a rental for 30 days or less. So a rental of 30 days was a short-term, 31 was not. In 2010, there was an error, I believe, introduced in the zoning code that defined it as less than 30 days. Rather than correcting the error, we're letting that error propagate into all the new ordinances that we're passing, including this one. I'm surprised that that is being enacted without any discussion at all of why we're doing that. The second thing, which I am wondering why we are doing that without any discussion of why we are doing that, is item number 4 on your agenda, which will be permanently changing the start time of your business meetings. I'd like to point out that the timer doesn't work in this room, so we don't know how many minutes we're speaking for. First, I would like to point out that the Brown Act requires all agencies like this to set a definite regular time for their meetings so that people know when they start at. Your current policy A1 calls for the meetings to start at 7 o'clock in the evening for the regular business, unless it has to be scheduled otherwise for the demand of business, which itself is a little bit outside the scope of the Brown Act that it could be a definite time unless otherwise. Tonight, there is no reason why it's not starting at 7 o'clock, yet you are passing this item at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And this item will permanently change the start time to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Our city was incorporated in 1906. In 1905, a scholar by the name of George Santayana published a book the year before our city was incorporated. It has the famous line in it that those who don't remember history are condemned to repeat it. Starting business meetings at 4 o'clock has happened before. It happened from 1942 to 1948. There was a reason for it then. World War II was going on at the start, and people could not run lights after dark. So there was a reason to hold meetings at 4 o'clock. It was moved, it had been 7:30 up until that time. It was moved back to 7:30 when the war ended. It's been either 7:30 or 7 ever since. The reason for that is, strange as it may seem to you, apparently there are actually some people in Newport Beach interested in what you do who have day jobs. And so it's a convenience to them to have the meetings held at a reasonable hour in the evening. This is being offered, I do not know by whom. I don't know why it's on the consent calendar. It's ignoring our history, our precedent, and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to the next speaker, please.
Good evening. I'm actually here to speak on something else, but I wanted to just give you guys some suggestions. Is that those of us that have very rigid day jobs cannot leave and be here by 4 or even 5 o'clock. And so I might ask that it be that the council meetings itself start 5:30, maybe even 6 o'clock, and at a very minimum to maintain the ability to call in. So, I mean, I finish my day maybe at 5 or 5:15, but I just have all the paperwork that has to get done before I leave. And so I could potentially call in even if I can't physically be here. And that will allow continued public participation as opposed to disenfranchising people that have jobs that get out too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
May I comment on short-term lodging?
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, I want to thank the council for all the work they've done to, the time they put into this whole subject about short-term lodging and the good neighbor policy. I think it's been a very good to do. There's been quite a few people ask me some questions, and it's a little bit of confusion in some of the provisions in here. For instance, on violations, are all violations equal? Are 2 Lugo violations equivalent to 2 code enforcement garbage can violations? It seems like the code doesn't differentiate between any kind of degree. I just want to mention that. You don't really define good neighbor policy. I mean, we kind of know what that is, but I think it should be defined better. The other thing is, what is exactly a nuisance response plan? That wasn't defined either. What I'd like to suggest is that you see, draw up some sort of a short-term lodging owner handbook or manual that explains in pretty much lay terms all the provisions that are in the code, so that it's really clear what they have to adhere to. Because otherwise, you got to kind of plow through all that. Because there's a lot of comments in here about subsection 5.95.05, 5.9047. 10.28007, and on and on and on. So I think a follow-up on this to enable operators to more easily obey all the code that they, actually most of them want to obey. It'd be good to put it in some sort of a handbook, so when they renew their short-term lodging permit, they can be issued that. So I think it's a great idea to enforce the good neighbor policy throughout.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Nancy Alston, and I'm representing Spawn. If I could have a few more minutes, because I'm representing hundreds of other members.
How about a couple extra minutes? You can have 5.
How about a couple? Thank you very much.
All right.
Well, I know there's a hue and cry from some people in the community about the onerous provisions of the new ordinance. I think if I were a good property owner with short-term rentals, I would feel the exact same way. But somehow in all of this, we have some bad actors, or they wouldn't be tearing up property and vomiting in the street and running naked and having porno films and that kind of thing while they're renting it. I would like to point out that we have the highest ratio of short-term rentals along the coast. I have put a lot of time into studying what other cities have done. And other cities, seemingly the effective ones, really enforce what they set out to do. So I'm hoping that if you pass a short-term ordinance, that we have some method of enforcing that. I like the idea of a good neighbor handbook, and I believe the previous speaker spoke of that. I looked into some cities that have done that, and some of them, like Oceanside, I think have been very effective. Some, however, have used it as just a PR for tourists. Now, tourists have been a part of Newport Beach life for a long, long time, and we like that. It brings us money. Some of us believe in capitalism, and it also is what we should be doing because we have wonderful beaches and wonderful harbors. But we need some kind of device that oversees what some people do when they rent for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nights. We need maybe that the person should be 21 years old because those underneath, below that age seem to be ones that have the most trouble. Now, there's no need for me to talk about trash and parking because that has been done at the last meeting. However, I would like for everybody to think about what too many short-term rentals do to a neighborhood. They destroy the cohesiveness of a neighborhood. A neighborhood is made up of people who speak to each other, who are in a carpool, who go to PTA, who maybe go to church, who come to City Hall. Short-term rental people don't do that. And while there is a place for short-term rentals, there has to be a balance between residents and the people, the tourists who do short-term rentals. Long-term rentals don't seem to be a problem. In fact, I have a friend who lives near me, and she owns a couple of townhomes. And just the other day, she rented to a couple that were coming from the peninsula because they simply couldn't stand it anymore. And they are long-term rentals. Another thing that it does is every time you turn a rental, a long-term rental, into a short-term rental, you lose the fact that you are going to have people come in and be a part of your community. I have a neighbor who's rented her house for 30-some years. That just happens in Newport Beach. People like the schools. People like the amenities. Another factor I'd like to bring up is in my research, I could not find one city that had sued Airbnb and hadn't collected money because they had cooked the books. I mean, I know that's a slang way of saying it. Maybe it was all just happenstance. But every city that I investigated had found that Airbnb, because they were doing it on the honor system, and I don't think you can collect your tax, your TOT tax, on the honor system. Another thing I found out is that hotels and motels have a lot of regulations. They have regulations when they construct the property. They have regulations after it's constructed. And they are also usually not in residential areas. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and I hope we can find a balance between the rental situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name's Connie Adnoff, and one real quick question. Why are we only having a minimum age of 21? Seems rather young to me. You need to be 25 to rent a car. And even then, that's questionable. These homes that are being rented are multi-million-dollar homes, and to have 21-year-olds, I'm so sorry, I was one once, long time ago, but that's a big, big responsibility. I would raise it at least to 25, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay. How are we doing on the phone? Okay. We'll go to the phone first. Hi, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. My name is Patricia Darkea, and I'm calling in about the STO ordinance for 2020, which is the Phase 1, and I assume it's the Phase 2. As a property owner of numerous properties for the last 20 years, my buildings that I had purchased are for my retirement investment. And I'd like to mention that I truly rely on short-term rentals to supplement my retirement, my mortgage, the TOT taxes, and my property taxes. Up until now, when I was speaking with my neighbors, I found out that there is this ordinance that is being discussed this evening, which is why I'm calling in. And I have never received anything in the mail, even though my TOT taxes have my mailing address on it. I do reside also in the Bay Area, and I use my properties as my own retirement, but also I keep all the mortgages and everything paid up via the short-term rentals. All the families that have been coming over generations to me, they come from Utah, Arizona, the East Coast, etc., and they absolutely love the reliability, the comfort, the beautiful beaches that we have here in Newport Beach, the calmness, the restaurants, the shopping, the arcade, and the Duffy excursions. And these are all things that are being generated by our short-term rentals, which I looked it up, and it shows that we even make more income on our short-term rentals for the city than hotels itself, because these families come from generations after years. This said, what I'd like to propose, because I am in favor of the good neighbor proposal, however, what I'd like to say is, please, let's go ahead and just defer this and discuss this for a little while until we can all get a better understanding as to what's taking place. Especially since now with the pandemic, our city has been so detrimentally hurt with all the closings of the restaurants and the arcades, and everybody relies on our tourism, this beautiful city that we have. So I would really request that we can get a better understanding of what's taking place. And at the same time, I'm very fearful that the city may be turning us all into a homeowners association where, God forbid, if I forget to take the trash out, I might be cited once. Or if one of my families forget to do that, that's a second citation. Before you know it, I have 3 citations, and maybe all of my things and my opportunities to prosper with short-term rentals might be removed. And this is detrimental because it's a very double-edged sword that we're working here with. And I think this really needs to be thought out well and needs to be very well understood and looked into by all of us, and that we all have an opinion to this. And lastly, I'd like to also mention that most of our neighbors were also very scared about all the homeless that we have now in our city. And that is one thing I think that we really should focus more on, because I know from personal experience that unfortunately the people who are homeless are sleeping on my patios, they're stealing my house, in the bathroom.
Okay.
There are no security.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I appreciate the time. All right, next speaker, please. All right, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Colleen Howes, and I'm a 40-year resident of Corona Del Mar and also a short-term permit holder. I'm very concerned about the parking regulation. Now, the city attorney just said that the parking requiring everyone to have a garage space or parking space for their guests was not part of this, but when you read it, it does say that we're required to offer a garage or carport space to each short-term lodging permit that we have. I personally am an owner-occupied residence, which many of the short-term rental permit holders are, and I park my cars in the garage. So with this, from the way I'm reading it, it looks like I'm going to have to go park on the street and allow my guests to park in my private garage where I have other things stored. This just doesn't seem like a safe and logical solution, and it doesn't solve any parking issues. I really think that the city council should consider changing this, the wording on the parking to, if it's an owner-occupied unit, that we should be exempt from this part of the ordinance. And I also question, why is it so different if I have long-term renters or I rent to someone for 31 days? Why I don't have to let them park in my garage? Why is this part of this provision? It's just not well thought out, and I know you have worked hard on this, and I appreciate it, and I know there needs to be some changes and some regulations, but I think it's just overreaching, and I'm very concerned about it, and I hope that this can go back and get some more input from others. And I was very disturbed. I went onto the city website, and it's already got this as a municipal code. You've already got it posted that it's already a new code, and it hasn't even been approved today. I don't quite understand what's going on. So I hope you will consider exempting owner-occupied short-term lodging permit holders from this parking regulation. And I appreciate all that you do for us, and I hope we can go forward in a very positive manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next caller, please. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Don Abrams. I'm a realtor and homeowner on Balboa Island, and I'd like to say a few things tonight. I know the council has worked hard and the ad hoc committee has worked hard on this, but frankly, you're trying to fix a situation that doesn't need fixing. Vacation rentals have been part of the fabric of Newport Beach for over 100 years. But since March, no new vacation rentals have been allowed under your emergency pandemic rule. And this is the only rule I know that you've put forward during the pandemic. There are many things right now that need emergency legislation, but vacation rentals are not one. So I urge you to remove the rule limiting new vacation rentals now. I believe using the pandemic as an excuse not to grant vacation rental licenses is an abuse of the city's emergency powers and, frankly, illegal. Second, I have attended dozens of hearings on vacation rentals over the last few years. The city always shows statistics at each meeting that there are a small number of complaints each year, and then they parade about a dozen people from around the city who come forward and complain about a vacation rental near them. However, there are thousands of vacation rentals every year bringing in $4 million in revenue to the city, and this handful of complaints pales in comparison. The city has a website with the names and phone numbers of all vacation rental owners, and it's a simple matter to track down the handful of homes that might be non-compliant. I received one call over the last few years complaining about a vacation rental I managed, only to find out they were calling about the wrong home, one that was down the block lived in by the homeowners. Third, the ad hoc committee has proposed a punitive new short-term rental law, despite what your council said tonight, which would be effective if we were managing a penal colony, which I hope we're not. The new law is full of administrative subpoenas, searches, suspensions, revocations, city inspections, and requirements for nuisance plans. Then, because the committee knows they don't have the right to do this, they're shifting another more punitive plan to the Planning Commission that requires 6-day minimums 95% of the time and limit new vacation rentals, among other provisions. I wonder why you're not suggesting any of these provisions for hotels, which are also short-term rentals and allow one-night stays. By discriminating against short-term rentals and not including other short-term rentals, the council would be taking, I believe, more illegal actions. Fourth, none of this shows any concern for the 1,500 property owners that rely on income from these properties. Many are people living on fixed incomes. And what about the thousands of people employed in the short-term rental business, maids, gardeners, restaurant owners and their staffs, employees of rental companies? I see no concern at all for these, only demonization. Finally, I urge the council not to pass this horrible piece of legislation. If you pass it, it will show a lack of regard for 1,500 property owners and hundreds of people in the short-term rental business, as well as thousands of guests who love to visit our city. You will increase congestion by requiring visitors to stay in hotels for short stays and then use their cars to try to park in our congested neighborhood instead of parking their cars in their vacation rental garage. In short, this legislation will accomplish the exact opposite of its intent and will only hurt our city, citizens, and visitors. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thanks, Don. Next speaker, please. All right, go ahead.
Oh, hi. My name is Lori Hamill, and I'm calling in about the short-term rental ordinance. I am a owner of a duplex in Corona Del Mar, and my back unit's a short-term rental, and I live in the front, and I'm dependent on that income to own my home. I spoke with Jeff Herdman about 35 minutes yesterday and went over a lot of the areas I had concerns with, and he kept telling me that I was reading the ordinance too literally, but the way I'm reading it, it's not clear, and I believe a lot of the areas need clarification and it needs to be rewritten. One specific area I have a problem with is paragraph 13 under the conditions, and where it says the owner shall ensure that all available parking spaces on site, which may include garage, carport, and driveway spaces, as well as tandem parking, are available for the transient user. So when I read that, I have to actually give both of my parking spots to my short-term rental. I'm not even allowed to park in my own garage. Now, when I was talking with Jeff, he said that's not what it means, and I'm reading it too literally. But when you actually read it, that is what it says, that I have to provide all the spaces on my unit to the transient user. So I think that needs to be clarified. In fact, that would make parking worse, because then I wouldn't be parking in my garage and I would be parking on the street, and I have a one unit over my garage, so they don't even need two spaces. The other issue I have is on conditions number 12, where I have to respond within 30 minutes for any answering service complaint. I think 30 minutes is completely unreasonable. I couldn't be in a meeting twice. If this happened twice and I was in an hour-long meeting and didn't respond on time, I would have 2 violations and my permit could be revoked. So once again, Jeff was trying to reassure me that that would not happen, but that is actually how the ordinance is written. So I think it needs to be considered from our standpoint and clarified. And the other part of that paragraph is that I'm never allowed to be, which is actually on section 9, I must be located within 25 miles of my unit at all times. It doesn't say I have to live within 25 miles. It says I must be within 25 miles. So if I drove to Long Beach for the day, I technically would be in violation of this ordinance, even if I answered the phone call. So I'm hoping that you guys will send this back to the committee with some of our concerns and address the real problems. Like there's parking issues in certain areas. There's not in mine. Maybe there needs to be permits for street parking. I'm not sure, but I hope that you will consider our needs as the permit holders that help you get $4 million of revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please. All right,
Good
go
evening.
ahead.
Yes, so I'm actually a owner of a short-term rental and a long-term rental and a resident. So I'm one of the few people who's all three. I'm also a lawyer who's worked in this area, and there is one issue that really hasn't been brought up that much, which is discrimination, which is particularly in the current environment should be a concern of the city council. What I'm concerned about is that people who are renting properties are, because of the violent concerns and everything, they're going to start to look very carefully at the people that they're trying to rent to. Now, that may sound like a good idea, but I can see the potential for litigation down the line on that issue. So I wanted to at least raise everyone's awareness of that. That, the earlier lady was saying, well, if we just, don't rent to people who are 21 or 25 or some age group, that could be an issue. There's also people coming from certain areas that, we may think of as not quite as upscale as Newport. We could see people discriminating on that basis. I wanted to talk kind of pragmatically about what a landlord can and can't do legally. On the short-term rental side, we don't have the power of eviction and everything like that we have on the long-term rental side. So I think the more pragmatic solution is really to work with the Airbnbs and VRBOs of the world to withhold deposits and that sort of thing for the guests that are coming in. To give you just sort of a sense of the practical, way it works, as an owner, you don't really have the ability to say, oh, I'll rent to this guest and not this other one, same way that a hotel couldn't do that either. A hotel in Vegas couldn't do that either. They couldn't say, well, I won't rent to this group of people because I think they might be, somebody who's likely to cause a disruption, unless you've had prior experience with that. And I think that's another area where the Airbnbs and the VRBOs of the world, could take an active hand, is in kind of highlighting, oh, we've had trouble with this guest before, and if you tell me that as an owner, I can react to that information. But I'm trying to get the city council sensitized to the fact that the legal ability that I have on the long-term rental side is simply different, and the levers that I can pull to solve problems are different than on the short-term rental side. On the short-term rental side, it does sort of have to look a little bit more like a hotel where I can't really discriminate against people, and I can react to things, but like the lady said, I can't always guarantee that for the entire summer I'm going to be within 25 miles of my unit. That's just simply unreasonable. People have to take trips. People go to the hospital. People get sick. Things happen. You can't always be in that position all the time. So I wanted to get the city council, before voting on this, to sort of think about, what's really practical and what really gets the job done here. And I think what really gets the job done here is the issue of deposits with the VRBO and Airbnbs of the world, because that's something that a landlord can react to. If the person causes a disturbance or causes disruption, we can hit their pocketbook then. As it stands right now, I know that, if somebody books my property, they cause a disruption the first night, I can kick them out, but what do I do then?
All right, please finish up.
Yep, that's basically it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next speaker, please. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Randy Beck, and I've been a resident since 1988, and I'll just make this brief. I've spoke to many of the city council people, and they've been amazing. I just want to bring up that this will be, with the rules going on, the people that have followed them and gone through, it seems like we're getting a little bit punished because I moved from an R1 to an R2 to make sure that I applied with the rules. I paid a premium to have an R2 so I could have the privilege of renting out the property, and I just feel that that would not be fair when I called the city and they told me if you did have a license, on a property you purchased, it would go forward and also just go with the property. So my biggest thing right now is I would appreciate that the license would be forwarded with the property in the future. And the last thing is, we have spoken to some of our rental persons that said they have become very good friends with the people that they met through our rental, which is our neighbors that are full-time, and they also happen to own two very prominent businesses, hotels and golf courses in our city, and they were very happy with our rentals. We have not had one citation in 8 years, and I just appreciate all your efforts, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the next caller, please. Hi, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Chris Nielsen, property owner, short-term lodging permit holder there in the 20th block on the peninsula. Really appreciate all you've done on this and the ad hoc committee. Couple comments, I'll keep them quick. I had submitted them, but particularly concerning is in section 5.95.040, paragraph 20B. You've done such a good job of writing this, but then just having the possibility for the city, and I'll just quote it real quick, the city manager shall have the authority to impose additional standard conditions applicable to all short-term lodging units as necessary to achieve the objectives of this chapter. That is just too broad a powers, no reflection whatsoever on the city manager, current or future. But I think if you're considering something so detailed, just to have that thrown in on the end is a really tough thing for property owners that are participating in this. Second, just love to have you work, if we could, on a little more notice for these meetings. Again, not a complaint. We're so grateful for all you do, but I'm averaging about 18 to 24 hours notice on these meetings. And as short-term lodging permit holders, I think we're logged in there. We should be given the written notice. We should know what's going on. And I'm just finding out about these last minute on all these different things affecting the short-term rentals. Additional point, concerned about the platforms collecting the TOT tax. I don't think either you as a city or us as owners want a third party involved with that. I think through this pandemic and some of the unilateral action by some of those platforms puts us at risk, both you as a city and us as owners. That's a tax that we're under requirement for, and that we should not involve a third party in that. We've got that down. We've been paying that for years, and we both can handle that without including them. I wanted to echo Craig's comment about a user manual, some education. I volunteer my time and energy towards that on working with this ad hoc committee or with the council to further educating and taking some of this off of your backs as council members and into ours as the private sector to help manage ourselves and include us all in a good process of doing that. And then the last caller, I just want to comment on that. I do agree with the zones, even though we run ours as though we would be in an R1. We're in a residential multifamily. We pay a premium for that. We're there. I think making this unilaterally, one rule fits all against those homeowners that are in an R1 versus right up against, I'm up against, Sharkies and stuff. I have other issues to deal with, and we manage ours well. We manage them tight. We're family oriented, but I think there needs to be some further consideration on this. So to end, we are so blessed, so fortunate to have you as a city council. So grateful for all you do. We're lucky to be in Newport Beach. We're all blessed beyond measure just on refining this final details. Love to be involved with it. Love a little more notice. Thank you for your help.
Thank you. Next caller, please. Hi, go ahead.
Hello, this is Jim Maloney. Hello, this is Jim Maloney. Sorry, I muted my phone. I'm just calling as a property owner, a short-term lodging and a long-term lodging owner operator. I appreciate all the work that's been done on the rules. I'm simply calling to weigh in with and to echo some of the concerns echoed by Don Abrams and others, which is there are certain areas within the city of Newport Beach which have just been historically rented on a short-term basis to visitors and guests from out of the area. This is something that's been going on since Balboa Island has been formed. And I just want to sort of echo a few additional points, which is when you do something like this to homes that are on Balboa Island, many of them are older. Many of them are 50, 75, 80 years old. And to start imposing conditions like parking requirements can be challenging when the properties themselves are not actually set up for that. Now, my wife and I buy these homes and we save them and we rent them out, some long-term, some short-term. The benefit of that, not only to the residents but to the city, is that the homes aren't being torn down. These are older cottages. They're historic cottages. They're why people come. I'd like to weigh in also on the fact that many of the people who rent the cottages that we own are locals, are families. They are using these cottages as overflow for their families when they come to visit the area. So if there's someone on the block and they're wanting to have family over for a holiday, they rent the cottage. And I will say that, we have not experienced problems with parking. People are very respectful. Now, that may be different on the peninsula. And so a one-size-fits-all set of rules I don't think is necessarily appropriate. So I appreciate the committee's work on trying to come up with a set of rules, but I would just ask that, some consideration be given on an area-by-area basis that takes into consideration the fact that some homes are just older. Some homes don't have a lot of parking. That's just the way they are. We can't magically add 2 or 3 car garages to some of these older properties. And that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next caller, please. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, this is Shannon from Abrams Coastal Properties, and I need some clarification. When we started off the meeting this evening, the attorney mentioned that what was not included in the ordinance, and that was the maximum occupancy of 2 per bedroom plus 2. But yet under the conditions section 5.95.05, limits the overnight occupancy of short-term lodging unit to the maximum permitted by the building code and fire code. And my understanding is that the building code and fire code are based on square footage. So at some point, if you could clarify that, because I would hate to see something passed that is less than what was discussed throughout the ad hoc meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next caller, please. Hi, go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is Jody Bowl, Balboa Island. And I have a home on Balboa, and I also have a rental, and I'd like to give my perspective on this. Over half of my renters are over the age of 50. They've either lived in Newport Beach or they have family members in Newport Beach, and they're the ones who spend the most money on Marine Avenue as tourists. They've been coming for many, many years and love the island and love Newport Beach. As Jim Maloney said, the cottages are very important to the majority of the people on Balboa Island, and I have noticed that a lot of the cottages are the ones that are being rented, and the owners use this money to augment paying for their property taxes, which, as you know, are very, very expensive. I also think the parking regulation is very onerous for many people. I am lucky. I have 2 parking garages, but I don't think it would be fair to be putting the owners out on the street and have parking for the renters. Everyone who goes on Balboa Island knows and has known for years that parking has always been challenging, but they come anyway. I don't think you should put that in your provision. And lastly, I might suggest, which is what I do has been very, very helpful, is have each owner, if they can, have a rental agreement. I've always had a rental agreement with all the provisions in there, the age. Obviously they have to be of an adult age.
The trash, good neighbor. I have some good neighbor policies in there. I make them sign it before they get a key. And if there's any issues, I have a $300 security deposit that I can keep. And they take that very seriously. I have never had a problem or one complaint. And lastly, I would like to suggest that if anybody on the subcommittee for this does not have a short-term rental, I think it would be very important to have an unbiased subcommittee, not that they're not, but I think you need a well-rounded committee to address all these issues. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, last call. All right, go ahead. We lose them? Okay. Just last call in the meeting room. No. Craig, sorry. You've already spoken. All right. We'll bring it back up. So a couple of quick clarification questions. I think there were some clarification questions on Mr. Harp's point. So two of them, one of them was parking clarification and the other was square footage questions. If you wouldn't mind just clarifying those for us, please.
Thank you, Mayor Neal. So at one point there was a discussion about whether or not the occupancy should be limited to 2 people per bedroom plus 2 people. So if you had a 2-bedroom place, the limit would be 6 people. We took a look at it, and we're going to stick with what's there now is basically what the building and fire code require. And that's the maximum occupancy you could have for any residence, and it is based on square footage, but it's much larger than what had been proposed as far as the 2 and 2. Does that clarify that point? Does anyone have any questions about the building and fire code?
I think that clarifies it. And then the parking clarification.
And then in regards to parking, I made a statement that said you don't have to have a parking place in order to get a short-term lodging permit, and that's currently what's being proposed in this code. However, if you do have an available parking space that's associated with that short-term lodging unit, then it needs to be made available for the short-term renter as opposed to being used for storage or some other purpose.
All right, I appreciate that. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's vote.
Prior to reading the vote, I'll read the ordinance title for item 3, ordinance number 2020-15, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach, amending section 3.16.060 and chapter 5.95 of the Newport Beach Municipal Code relating to short-term lodging. With Councilmember Duffield absent, the motion carries, and Councilmember, did we miss someone? Hold on, 1, 2. Oh, Councilmember Avery, are you a thumbs up? The motion carries 6-0.
All right. So item number 12 has been pulled. Ms. Dixon, do you want to see any kind of staff report, or what would you like?
Thank you, Mayor. No, I do not need. It's funny.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It kind of bounces back. Thank you, Mayor. I do not need, the reason I pulled it, I do not need a staff report necessarily, but if Mr. Sherwin is in the audience, I saw it as an opportunity just to update us on the status of our hotels in the community. I think it's a good opportunity given the COVID impact, economic impact, and then I'll have one more question after he completes just some comments. Mr. Sherwin, you don't need to go into a full detail. Just give us an overview of the macro of what's going on in our hotel industry in Newport Beach, please.
Mayor Neal, members of the City Council, I am Gary Sherwin, the President and CEO of Newport Beach and Company. Joining me tonight is Michelle Donahue, who is our Vice President of Group Sales and manages the day-to-day activities of the Newport Beach Tourism Business Improvement District. I think I don't want to state the obvious here, and I think you all know that what we are going through with our hospitality industry nationally and particularly here in Newport Beach is nothing short of absolutely devastation in terms of our business climate. We have never seen anything quite like this before in our lives. It is tragic, and it has cost the city, as you know, tens of millions of dollars, and it has inflicted a lot of damage among our hotels, our restaurants, and our attractions. Particularly as it pertains to the TBID. The TBID was created in the wake of the recession in '09, and it was done specifically to go after the group and meetings and convention market. And I think there's sometimes a misperception here in town that most of our visitors are here for leisure purposes. They're either staying in short-term rentals or our hotels just to bring their family and enjoy a nice vacation. And in fact, we get a lot of those. But the fact is that our hotels really depend on the meetings and convention business to pay their bills. About 60% of all of their business is really related to the meetings and convention market. That's because these meetings bring in large numbers of people. They bring in food and beverage. They do off-site events that involve the harbor and other attractions and entities here in town. And that switch has literally been turned off. We are seeing nearly no business whatsoever for the rest of 2020 for the very understandable reason that people don't want to risk their health and travel anywhere or go in a ballroom, and that's even assuming you could even get into a ballroom because of the limitations on group sizes right now. So what we're trying to do is to continue the dialogue and working with our hotels in that area. We're hopeful that a vaccine will be developed here before the end of the year so that we can bring that aspect of the business back. Right now, we still have 2 hotels that are closed. We know that one of them, in all likelihood, will not open until next year, and a large part of that is because the meetings and convention business is non-existent right now. So our hotels right now are averaging somewhere, the ones that are open, somewhere in the low 40s in terms of occupancy. We are in the middle of July. We should be at 80% or more. If you factor in the hotels that are closed, citywide occupancy right now is somewhere about 30%. So we have a long ways to go to recover. This TBID has always been an instrumental part of helping drive business to the city. The hotels depend on it. And as we come out of this crisis, the hotels which have had to reduce their staffing considerably are going to rely on this TBID to help bring them more meetings and convention business, which is frankly what's going to get us through this. The hospitality industry here in town cannot fully recover until the meetings and convention industry recovers. So we're hopeful that 2021 bodes a little more favorably to us, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Mayor, I just have one more question.
Absolutely.
Mr. Sherwin, the economic condition of the hotels, is everyone current on the TOT remittances to the city?
Last I have heard from the finance department, we have one major hotel that did not pay initially back in April. They subsequently closed. They are trying to pay their back TOT and TBID costs, but there are some penalties connected with that they are trying to work with the city to get waived because they feel that produces an undue burden for them. There's another small inn, I understand, that also has not been paying their TOT, but everyone else, to my knowledge at least, is current.
Well, for those hotels who have continued to pay their legal tax liability, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Sherwin.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say that it's okay. You don't have to come back up, Gary, but this was a pretty detailed report, so I appreciate that on this one. I was curious how you were going to be handling such a steep reduction, so I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions before we go to public comment on this? All right, seeing none. Do we have any public comment on this particular item number 12?
Mayor O'Neill, members of the council, this is Jim Mosher. The only comment I wanted to make is that a few minutes ago on the consent calendar, you approved an item 9, which was a COVID-19 economic recovery plan for the Restaurant Association prepared by another wing of the very well-paid Mr. Sherwin's organization. And the slide, page 12 of that staff report, is giving a projection of hotel occupancy, supporting the idea that there should be a summer restaurant month next month, and it's showing the hotel occupancy rate this month being at 85%, being about 81% next month. So there seems to be some lack of communication between the different wings of this organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. All right, do we have any calls on this item? All right. Hi, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. This is Sue Dobbins. I'm a resident of Balboa Island. Our family started coming to the island 35 years ago from Arizona, and it was such a fabulous experience for us. We ultimately ended up buying a home 15 years ago. We started renting in the key weeks of the summer 6 years ago.
Hi, I'm sorry to cut you off. Are you speaking to the short-term lodging?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry.
Oh, that we voted on that one already.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I was on hold for so long. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Hang on just one second.
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry. Are you still there? Nope. Okay. I was going to ask her about that. All right. Any other? Okay. All right. Let's bring it back. Do we have any further discussion, Ms. Dixon?
I'll make a motion.
All right. I'll make the second. Any discussion? All right. Let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 6-0.
All right, now we'll move to public comments on non-agenda items. Earlier, there was a gentleman named Craig who had wanted to speak. This is the time to speak on non-agenda items. Oh, a different Craig is getting up. Okay. All right, there you go.
Man, you just caught me after a fresh water shower. Man, that ain't right. My hair's got to look good. Mayor, how you doing? Is there any way we could throw this up on the screen with my flash drive?
Unfortunately, the flash drive wasn't able to work, but we were able to see the pictures that you had provided.
Okay, so I'm going to hold them up. If you give me a little extra time, 5 minutes maybe.
I'll give you 30 extra seconds. So
I appreciate that. We got missiles pointed at oil offshore. Well, Huntington Beach is famous for that. And I grew up in Newport Beach, believe it or not, Brea. I got switched off between what I thought was my family, but that's all over. But you could see the missiles pointed at the oil derricks, which would be Huntington Beach turf. And then you see the oil tankers, which would be like Newport Beach without those scaffolds on the ocean. And if that all got hit at once, I will go to another page. Catastrophically, you understand that word is all at once? And as well, catwalks. And I'm going to specify right now, prisons are funding this mess. This is our taxpayers' money going for this to feed prisoners. In my eyes, any violent murderer should be executed. Don't feed them, get rid of them. Common sense. But you'll see all the dots on this other document of all those oil derricks in the Gulf, which is the stream to the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, which we need for rain cycles, for minerals off the mountains and such. And if you looked, you'd see the dead fish. If these oil derricks get hit at once by these mocking arrows of my kings. Let me specify that again. And then we have meth labs. Spyglass Hill, Newport Beach. You got a meth lab up there. What are you doing? There's 13 lethal poisons to make meth. So let me specify how a controlled substance is attempted murder. What are these judges doing? You don't give them another chance. These kids don't stand a chance with this crap on the streets. I've done it. I know. I know what that stuff does to your head. Not only that, but the Holy Ghost is involved. We won't go there yet, but I'm gonna. But, what are we making an example for our children? I don't have any. I'm protecting everybody else's. I'm doing the police's job. I'm doing the fire department's job. And I live on $1,000 a month SSI. going from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I appreciate one more comment. You'll see machine guns at these locations that I've specified. This is depleted uranium rounds. Now I'll calm down. Do you know what this stuff does to people? Depleted uranium? There's only 3 things to ordinance. One is no inbreeding, no projectile weapons, which means a gun, bow and arrow, nothing flies towards another man. You want to fight, you get blades, you go out and you slaughter each other. Third of all, no poisons. That would be cocaine, heroin, meth. And listen, Mayor, I really appreciate you letting me talk today. And you're a very patient man. You put up with some people, and the priority's a little messed up, because I think what Craig Sheets is talking about today is the water. We got to protect the water. That's it.
Appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next public speaker on non-agenda.
Good evening. My name is Susan Skinner. During the July 1st meeting, Mr. Muldoon made a comment effectively stating that COVID-19 was equivalent to the flu and implying that we are overreacting. As a physician, I would like to address this misconception. According to the CDC, the death rate for flu in patients over 65 is 0.83%, whereas COVID has killed 17% of California patients over the age of 65, according to a California Department of Health update on July 11. For patients under the age of 65, COVID has killed 0.8% of California patients with the flu, or with COVID, versus the flu, which kills 0.003% of young patients. We are getting better at treating COVID, so that death rate is falling, but it is still much more lethal than the flu. The non-lethal effects of COVID also far exceed the flu. Whereas the flu is essentially a respiratory illness, COVID is much, much more than that. It can attack multiple organs, including the lungs, brain, intestines, kidneys, and heart. Autopsies are showing blood clots in every organ, and we are seeing strokes and heart attacks in young patients. Half of all hospitalized patients have significant cardiac damage, and many patients have symptoms weeks or even months after infections. Mr. Muldoon also said that, quote, people are not meant to be controlled by the government. This is an absurd statement. Does that mean we don't have speed limits on roads? Should we give up laws on drunk driving? These are also government controls done to protect the public health, and I assume that Mr. Muldoon has no problem with these laws. Our hospitals are now in danger of being overwhelmed. In New York, hospitals brought in refrigerator trucks because the morgues could not handle the number of bodies. Texas and Arizona hospitals have now also asked for refrigerator trucks to store bodies. My own hospital has doubled the number of COVID patients in the last few weeks, and we have already implemented our surge plan. My hospital-based colleagues are terrified for their health and their families, but they still come to work every day. When the attitude of we are not meant to be controlled by the government prevails, public health measures suffer, and people literally die. As Mr. Muldoon points out, it won't be him because of his age, but it might be his parents or my mother, and that is unacceptable. Words like his, spoken with authority from a dais, have consequences. The best tools that we have to fight the virus are social distancing and wearing masks, but somebody listening to Mr. Muldoon may feel that these are not critical steps to take. In medicine, we are taught to, quote, first do no harm. I only wish that politicians were taught the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're a therapist, not a medical doctor. My information was from a medical doctor at Hoag. It said that below a certain age, the same fatality rate as the flu, which it is. People are not meant to be controlled by government or people like you who disagree with them. They have the right to live their lives. If someone is concerned for their health, they can stay home, they can self-quarantine, they can follow practices to protect them. It's not up to you to tell people how to live their lives.
All right. Okay. Next speaker, please.
What up? First, I just want to say I'm fired up on the free parking. Last week I spoke in Redondo and I got towed, so yeah. But what up, council? My name is Chad Kroger. I'm an activist and influencer. To keep my stoke steady during the QT, I've looked to the wisdom of my influencer colleagues, like Cindy Prado. She posts morning workouts on her balcony in Miami while doing body squats in a bikini. It's awesome. But for others, it's not so simple. Cindy could shred her quads anywhere. But, you know, my dogs like Marcel Flores and Jack Morris, they're being left in the dust. You know, like Marcel, his fragrance launch in Hawaii got pushed to October. And Jack, he's been in Bali this whole time, and he's had to post the same infinity pool shot 3 times now. The last stimulus bill helped businesses large and small, but for some reason, influencers were left out and considered non-essential. And as we speak, influencers have lost an average of 30% on their income. Now, 30% may not seem drastic, but council, picture a Dan Bilzerian photo with 30% less guns. Just wouldn't work. That is why we are petitioning for a stimulus bill that brings relief to influencers. This comes in the form of new likes, views, and shares. For example, an influencer with 1 million followers or more should be granted a minimum of 10,000 new followers a month and 20,000 extra likes a week. I provided the city clerk with a formal graph, so please assess when you make your calculation. We must not allow the C virus to impede our ability to be influenced. Oh, and by the way, Logan Paul said Corona was no joke back in January. I think you learned a lot from that time he accidentally filmed that dead body. All right, thank you.
All right. Next public speaker.
What up, council? Chad is right. Logan Paul is cool. I met him. Up top, I've got some verbiage issues about government gifts. I don't think we should call it a bailout because I think that has a negative connotation. I think we should call it a dude. I won't bail on you because that shifts the focus to the government being a chiller. On to the meat of my speech. The stimulus bill is cool, but it could be cooler. Influencers need to be included. It's significant. In my life, I've had bad influences and good ones, like Chad. The good ones have been good, but the bad ones have been really, really bad. Like my friend Hunter in 5th grade, I swear on a stack of Xboxes this tall, he convinced me to be insecure. Influencers on Instagram helped me get over that. They taught me to be happy and better every day. And I'm grateful for every day that I'm danker, which I think is happy and better combined. Thank you. I'd also like to sing a song to Hunter. I'm doing this tonight. You're probably gonna start a fight. I know this can't be right. Hey, baby, come on. I loved you endlessly when you weren't there for me. So now it's time to leave and make it alone. I know that I can't take no more. It ain't no lie. I wanna see you out that door, baby. Bye, bye, bye. Thank you.
There's 2022 for you. All right. Any other public speakers? Any calls? No. All right. So we'll move on to item number 13. Does anyone require a staff report on?
Item 14 is actually a public hearing item. I know it's out of order.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, say that again. I missed you.
We need to go to item 14 first before 13.
Okay. All right, we're going to go to item 14 first. This was a pretty detailed staff report. Does anyone require a staff presentation on this item?
Sorry. So, Mayor, on this item, for the similar reason that I may be entering a transaction based on discussions last week, I'm going to recuse myself.
All right, understood. Just give it a moment.
Yeah, just make.
Yeah, just 1 second. Okay. So before we get to comments, I just need to know, does anyone require a staff presentation on this? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to put for the community's information that we're very fortunate that our taxpayer dollars are coming back to help us and help us on the council to redeploy those dollars to support our businesses. So the $219,000 will be used for community grants, and there are subject to, as the staff report indicates, some federal restrictions because of low income and the community development block grant requirements of lower to moderate income. But the point is, more money is coming in that just as we did a few weeks ago with our CARES grant came through to us via the county and Michelle Steele's office of $2.1 million, and that's going through a process, and I think we'll be able to announce the recipients of that in another week or so. I don't see Tara, but maybe in another week or so we'll be with her. And then this, again, will go through the same outside agency that is reviewing, will be reviewing the grant application. So 2.1 million plus 200,000 plus another, I think some other funds are going to be available. Federal CDBG funds are also available. So about $2.5 or over $2.5 million that we're making available to the community, to our businesses that satisfy certain requirements from the federal government. But it's really good that we're able to do this and hopefully get it into the businesses' hands as soon as possible. So I just wanted to edify that comment, and it's all in the staff report, but I just wanted everybody to know in case they don't read it. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and I'll just note for everyone, we continue to have the subcommittee on business ad hoc, and Councilmember Dixon pushed hard for this item number 14. So it's a good way for us to continue to help our businesses, especially as many of them got closed again yesterday. So I do appreciate the effort and the work, especially at the staff level, this is complicated. I know it's complicated. I think a lot of people probably don't recognize how complicated CDBG is. So I just want to say thank you for the work on this one. So any other questions or comments before we go to public? All right, public comment on this item?
Mayor O'Neill, members of the council, this is Jim Mosher. I have the same two comments on this that I had on the previous economic development or stimulus program that the city had. The first is about the eligibility requirement that the business, to be eligible, operate from a commercial or industrial space. And the question, just as an example, if the business, which was impacted by COVID, was short-term rental operations, a person who happens to manage their properties out of a office space in an office building, if I'm understanding this, would be eligible for the lottery. Somebody doing the same business from their home would not be eligible. I'm curious if that is the correct interpretation. And second, I'm wondering, because especially with the previous program, the opportunity to participate in the lottery was extremely short, I think like 6 days, and it was announced maybe 3 days in advance on the city website, which is, I think, not very well known. So it kind of restricted the program, although it was very well participated in, to businesses that somehow, I do not know how they knew about it. Are all business license owners being informed of this program in the same way at the same time? That's the second question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this item? Do we have any calls? All right, we'll bring it back. Yeah, I'll just note, what I understand is when we went out for the CARES Act bidding for businesses, we were almost triple the number that had been the previous high for our outside administrator to see for a city. So our businesses, I think, figured this one out, and I suspect they'll probably figure this one out too in terms of notification. But it's a fair question about making sure that they're properly notified. So just real quick, it's probably worth just asking how we make sure that this program will be well known, similar to the way that the previous program was particularly well known and applied for. So whoever would like to answer that one on the notification side.
Good evening, Mayor. Lauren Wooding-Whitlinger with the Community Development Department. Yes, SBDC, who will be administering the program, will spend probably the next 2 weeks advertising the program and notifying businesses in Newport Beach of the upcoming application period, which we expect to open in early August.
Early August. All right. Great. Thank you very much. All right. Any other questions? Ms. Dixon, would you like to make the motion?
I would like to make a motion. Thank you, Mayor, for the Community Development Block Grant Economic Development Job Retention Program. I move that we support that.
All right.
I'd like to second it.
Seconded by Mr. Herdman. Let's go ahead and vote.
With Councilmember Muldoon recusing himself and Councilmember Duffield absent, the motion carries 5-0.
All right. I'll give it just a moment to bring Councilmember Muldoon back in. All right, so item number 13 is the approval of COVID economic relief funding support for the Balboa Island Merchants Association. Good staff report. Does anyone require a staff discussion on this? No. I will say, I'm going to make a few comments real quickly, and then I'll welcome anyone else making comments too. I certainly understand the subcommittee's recommendations at the last city council meeting. Although I didn't support them, I understood them. On this one, I just want to go back in history for just a second, because one of the reasons that we had the associations and the money that we were giving to the associations in the past was because they had originally been bids, and to wean them off, the councils had approved a certain number of years of funding, and we had gone over those years by about 2 or 3, and so last year we had agreed to move it down by half, and then we were going to move it down to 0. And I do recognize, like I said, the subcommittee's thought process in terms of kind of a one-time approval for the grant for money given the current economic environment. I think with the CARES Act funding, in addition to the the item we just approved. Not only has this council done a good job of supporting a lot of businesses directly, but at this point, given that we hadn't approved the Balboa Island, the other association that had requested money, I think we shouldn't be supporting a second one either. But I would, for the same reasons I would have voted no last meeting, I'm still going to vote no this meeting, and I wanted to at least make it reference, my thought process behind that. Any other council members like to speak on this? Mr. Herdman.
Thank you, Mayor. At our last meeting, 4 of our 7 council members voted no on allocating economic recovery funding to the Balboa Island Merchants Association, based on a comment that association was not doing good work. Despite the fact that the Balboa Village Merchants Association partnered with the Balboa Island Merchants Association Incorporated to develop an economic recovery program with Newport Beach and Company, the approval of this item was defeated. Tonight we've got an identical agenda item for an allocation of $20,000 to a newly organized Merchants Association that did not meet the deadline for submission for these applications. The application was submitted almost 2 weeks late, has holes in it. What I mean by holes is no plan in place that addresses the effects that the coronavirus has had on businesses on Marine Avenue. No specifics, no balance. The balance sheet is incorrect. The income line does not match the profit and loss line. Hold on just a minute. And no defined spending plan for the funds other than to use the dollars for the refinishing of benches on Marine Avenue, which has absolutely nothing to do with the economic recovery of small businesses on Marine Avenue. Unlike BIMA Incorporated, who developed a passport marketing plan with the Village Association and the Newport Beach and Company, the BIMA is planning on taking taxpayer dollars and using it on refinishing benches, which are city-owned property. It's just not equitable, I agree with you, Mayor, to deny funding to one organization who submitted a well-thought-out application for economic recovery and provide funding for another organization whose application has absolutely no plans for economic recovery. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before we go to public comment on this? Okay. We'll go to public comment on this item number 13.
Mayor Neal, members of the council, I don't know if it has anything to do with the new early starting hour of the council meetings. I am your only member of the public you have here in the community room. My comment on this item is to remind you again of the past. Might seem a little bit irrelevant or off the topic, but among the grants you've made prior to COVID, one of the programs you had was called Community Event Grants. It's still administered by the city staff. There was a period of time when there was a committee that met in public to review the applications for grants. And one of the standards the city had for eligibility for a grant was that the amount of money that the city provided would be a small fraction of the amount of money that the organization raises on its own from other sources. This is a new group, kind of competing, I guess, with the other one. I don't quite understand what they're doing. Their income, according to the statement here, is extremely small. They're asking for a grant which far exceeds the amount of money that they raise on their own. It says they raise like maybe $900 through membership fees, and they're asking $20,000 from the city. And much as we had that standard for community event grants, I think it applies here. To me, this, I know some of the people who are involved in this, and I respect them. However, it seems to me it's just private people asking to spend public money. And if they're eligible, there's any number of other private people who would also like to spend the public's money however they would like. Thank you.
Thank you. Any calls? All right. Hi, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Don Abrams. I'm a realtor on Balboa Island. I would like to echo what Councilman Herdman said. I was very surprised that the council turned down the request from our Balboa Island Marketing Association at the last meeting, because I believe that had been recommended by your staff. And this was money for merchants on Marine Avenue who were really struggling during this COVID period. And I wish you would reconsider giving that organization the money. I think the rationale was that since the organization was doing well financially, they didn't need the money, but they wouldn't have asked for it if they didn't need it in concert with Balboa Village, which you did give the money to. So I agree with Councilman Herdman. This other organization, frankly, I don't know much about. I know they support protecting the eucalyptus trees on Marine, which is a good thing, and protecting our benches, which is a good thing, but I've never received any literature from them. I've never been asked to even go to a meeting, never been invited. I really don't know much about them, but I do know that our original organization is a good organization and needs the money, and I hope you'd consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other calls? All right, bring it back up. Any discussion? All right, I'm going to make a motion to not approve staff recommendation on this item. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Avery. So the motion on the floor is to deny the grant request. So let's go ahead and vote.
With Councilmember Brenner abstaining and Councilmember Duffield absent, the motion carries 5-0-1.
All right. At this time, we'll move into item 15, which is the COVID update. So with that, I'll turn it over to our city manager.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. This will be a brief report here. I have a PowerPoint that should be coming up. There we go. Very good. I think the biggest update is the news that came out yesterday from the governor through a press conference that there are additional statewide closures of indoor activities in several economic sectors. That was, I think, kind of some heaviness probably across, from staff in the community and everyone involved here to see that happening. But unfortunately, with the rising number of cases and what's happening, not just in California, but across, I think, the country, these are the next steps the governor's taking. He's talked a lot about dimming or toggling on and off, and this is definitely a step back. Additionally, for us, we are one of the counties that are on the monitoring list. Our Orange County is. There are now approximately 80% of the California population now on that monitoring list here. So that brings additional areas of closure that I'll go into detail on. But I do want to make note for Orange County, when they look at what factors are put into the monitoring list, they're looking at 3 statistical areas. It's elevated disease transmission, increased hospitalizations, and limited hospital capacity. I think where we're meeting the requirement there as a county side is that positivity rate. They're looking for a positivity rate under 8%. The Orange County is at 12%. Today's numbers that just got reported out actually push that up to 14%. So that number is not a good one right now and increasing. But on the positive side, on the hospital capacity, the numbers are actually good. That ICU bed availability at 41% is much higher than the watch list requirement is to be at less than 20%. So that number is, I think, a very good thing for Orange County, as well as the ventilator availability at 65%. The watch list threshold is 25%. So I think there's some good factors in there. We'll have to see how they bear out, but it's that positive rate specifically that is causing the concern right now. Back to the statewide closures. So you can see here what closed statewide. Sorry, the font's a little tiny here on this, but the dine-in restaurants, wineries, tasting rooms, movie theaters, most of those we had been rolled back here for the county as being part of the watch list items. I think the one item that's additional is on the bars, that all operations must be closed. I will say what I've seen in the guidance, though, is that if on the outdoor side, if there's full food served with alcohol, that is okay. But any kind of bar activity that's just the alcohol, whether it's indoor or outdoors, is now closed, and that's a statewide. So this impacts us a little bit, but we had been operating under this for about, I want to say at least the past week or so. What's added, though, is they said for those counties on the monitoring list, they added several additional sectors here: the fitness, places of worship, offices for non-critical sectors, personal care services that are all the salons, nails, tattoo parlors, and malls, indoor malls. But I did want to note in making this additional closure, it's really focused on indoor operations. So they really want to prevent the mixing of populations outside of households within indoor operations. So if the businesses are able to continue their operations through outdoors, that would still be allowed. So I think there's a little bit of opportunity there for some of these areas. And I think that's something that, with this just having come out yesterday, we're still pushing and exploring with the state and through the county and directly with the state to find out, what these mean. But I think under the principle that it's really limiting the indoor space of mixing of non-same households together, I think that's a good principle to look at as our businesses look to see how to operate, and if they're able to navigate, with that outdoor operation, that'll be a part of that consideration. And we're continuing looking for that guidance from the state and clarification there.
So real quick, one of the items that I've gotten a lot of questions on is hair salons and barbershops. It's probably worth noting for anyone who operates a hair salon or barbershop to pay attention to what the guidance is coming out of what's the agency on cosmetology, and it's barbershop and cosmetology. There's a state agency that directly regulates this. They seem to have come out yesterday afternoon with a statement that they're not at this time at least allowing outdoor hair salon and barbershops. So there was a question, obviously a good one, immediately. Well, can we just move outdoors? And it appears, at least as of now, that they've said no. But I would encourage anyone having those questions to refer to the state regulatory body. Mr. Herdman.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question of the city manager.
Go ahead.
Grace, if you know the answer to this, I'll be impressed. You might have to call on a staff person to answer it. But how many restaurants in the city have taken advantage of the encroachment permit that we approved here for them to expand their facilities outside of their restaurant?
Wow, so staff tells me, so you might not be as impressed as as you could be. 50, 50, okay. So that's
good.
Yeah, and I want to commend staff's really been working very hard when those come in to turn them around as quickly as we can.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say I've talked to a lot of restaurant owners who have taken advantage of it, and they are really thankful to our staff for how fast you're working on this. And I'll just say so am I. Not only have I taken advantage of it, which I really enjoy personally, but from a standpoint of trying to bridge our businesses out, which I think is what Mr. Herdman is kind of referencing there.
Well, especially on the island, Will, because we don't have any parking lots for them to expand into, so they're out on the sidewalk, and that's very much appreciated by the business owners.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you. I know that added on some effort there, but it's a big deal. Quite frankly, I think we're probably going to get to the point where even after this, we're going to have to look at finding ways to get our businesses out, because I'm hearing from so many residents saying they're actually really enjoying it. So it's a tough enough time. I know we'll figure this out, but I'll just say I really appreciate the effort, because keeping our businesses viable at this time is important. All right.
Okay. Next, I wanted to just touch on our City Hall side with the increasing cases, and we do have some cases in our city operations as well. We made the determination to close to the public beginning yesterday. We still are offering full service. We have the drop-off and drop-in and out bins for permitting and those over-the-counter type services. So we still have those going, and fortunately, we had originally done that when we had the initial closure, so we were able to transition to that very quickly. So we are making sure to continue our operations, just not without that in person at this time. Also made the additional step of splitting the staff in terms of location of work. So all staff in City Hall or in office spaces are alternating between working in the office and telecommuting, those who are able to. And that enables us to just reduce the number of people we have and the number of exposures if potentially we have additional cases that come in. And I think it's just a way to be mindful of that, because while the number of cases we have in our city operations is not very large, the biggest concern becomes when you start doing that contact tracing and seeing what that exposure is, and when people need to be quarantined under that exposure, measures that need to be taken, and that's where there's a potential impact in services that we're really mindful of right now. And I will be having the chief come up and talk in a minute, and we'll talk a little bit on the firefighter and lifeguards and what we're doing there, and still maintaining operations well, but want to bring that up. I will also say we're continuing with our day camps. Day camps have still been allowed, and we have that guidance through that. We're averaging about 250 kids a week, so good demand and partaking of that, as well as our JG program. The expanded program kicked off today, and the chief will go over that just briefly in a minute. And actually, it's now, so. Turn on the.
Would it help if I turned it on? Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Jeff Boyles, Fire Chief. On the COVID update, I have a couple of numbers that overlap with Ms. Leung, but I think it's probably important to talk about them. Newport Beach has 626 positive cases as of this afternoon. We have 3 deaths related to our city since they started keeping track of the first one back in March 25th. Countywide, in the past 3 weeks, the testing rates have increased by 27%. But the interesting piece of that is that the positivity rate has gone up to 14%, which is higher than the threshold that the county is looking for. Hospitalization rates have risen in the past 3 weeks by 87%. So that's another piece of the puzzle that has some of the stakeholders concerned that the hospitalization rates are going up. But the interesting dichotomy to that, if you will, is that the number of occupied ICU beds is remaining relatively stable at 41%, like Ms. Leung just said. And the availability of our ventilators is also stable at about 65%. So you may remember over the past couple of weeks or past month or so, that's been hovering around the 70% ratio and at about the 40% ratio for those two. So there has been a slight increase with those, but not nearly as much as the actual hospitalization rates.
Chief,
yeah, go ahead.
Just want to get your opinion on that. So we're seeing a stable number of ICU beds available. At the same time, we're seeing an increase in cases, positive, people being diagnosed. And from what I've read, it's because we learned how to treat it so well, and that's why fatality numbers are dropping severely. Is that sort of your understanding as well, or do you know what, are you told anything by the professionals?
I don't know if it's because of treatment, per se. I have another interesting, further down, but I'll just skip to it now, an interesting fact that I came across is that the population with the lowest amount of positive rates is ages 0 to 17. So that's the lowest amount. The second lowest amount are ages 75 and over, technically 75 to 84 and 85 and above. So the 2 lowest rates are on the young and the older side. Now, the highest rate, probably doesn't surprise you, are the 25 to 34-year-olds, followed closely by 35 to 44 and 45 to 54. So if you take that group from 25 to 54, that's where the bulk of the positive rates are coming from. So I don't know if that's because they get it and they can weather it better, or if we're treating it better, to answer your question. I don't have a clear answer for that.
Excellent, thank you.
Ms. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. This hospitalization numbers, was that Orange County or Newport Beach?
That's Orange County.
So let me just update on today's numbers locally for Newport Beach in our local hospital. There's compared to 1 week ago, there's a 33%, approximately 33% decrease in terms of COVID patients in the Hoag Hospital. And they are down 7% of the available beds from yesterday. So it's fluctuating, but it's trending down. And I believe I heard, I don't have it here on my phone, that the number of deaths is stabilizing or going down. There's still deaths every day, but they're going down, I think, for the county.
I think statistically speaking, yes, you're correct.
So thank you.
Moving on to the fire department piece of it, we've responded to 432 of our enhanced precaution calls now. So that's, again, when the dispatch center lets us know that somebody is flu-like or symptom-like. 29 of the patients that we've transported to the hospitals in our back of our ambulances have turned out to be positive. Now, up until tonight, I've been reporting to you that with our PPE and our systems in place and the vigilance that our folks have had when they're treating patients, we've had no positive cases. But as you know, as reported, the lifeguards had several cases last week, and then it has infiltrated our firefighter or our fire stations as well. It appears to be community spread. We do have some firefighters and some lifeguards that have tested positive, so we've taken very aggressive measures to quarantine through the contact tracing to pull everybody that we deem to be highly exposed off duty as a result of that. That was a decision that I made along with Grace to determine to keep our staffing levels but get people out of the stations that we feel that could have been potentially exposed. So our staffing levels, all the fire stations are still staffed, all the apparatus is still staffed, but we're doing it with people that are off duty in a similar fashion when we do our strike teams, when we send fire engines up and down the state. One of the remedies that we've put in place is that we've removed ourselves from out-of-county responses. So if there's a fire here in Orange County, we will go to it. But if there's something up in Butte County or somewhere far away, we won't send personnel out of town for an extended period of time to make sure that we have the staffing here in town. This morning we sent out a very aggressive plan of how to conduct ourselves and disinfect within the fire stations. We've been doing masks, we've been disinfecting, but now we're taking extra measures as far as off-going crews, cleaning different things, and on-duty crews. Only one person doing fitness at a time instead of the whole crew going in there and things of that nature. So we've made some adjustments just to help mitigate some of the exposures moving forward.
So just 1 second, Councilmember Muldoon.
Thank you, Mayor. You just said a word I wanted people to understand. You said community spread.
Correct.
Can you tell us what that means?
Community spread is essentially, like I said, we have been very vigilant when we go on calls with what we know to be sick people, but people have lives outside of work. So they go home and they have families and neighbors and friends, and it's keeping your guard up 24/7. So I've been working, I know Chief Lewis has been working and Grace has been working with city employees to really drive that point home to all employees, even when they're not at work, to stay vigilant.
So essentially, we think that the cases we're coming down with on our staff are often happening from community spread, them living their lives at home, because we have all these protocols in place so it doesn't spread internally.
It appears to be the first one appeared to come from the outside, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Joy. No, I can't.
Okay,
so
it's
okay.
been
I'll
pressed for a while, and I was going.
No. I'll pay better attention. I thought I'd be able to see you, but if I can't, I'll look over more often.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to you and the lifeguard staff for the 4th of July and that amazing rescue. And are we going to have an opportunity to thank that young man in person and have him down here to appreciate him? I think that would be something really inspirational for our community.
Yep, I was thinking, I wanted to get through the 4th of July in this meeting, but yes, I did think that would actually be fantastic. So I was going to talk to the chief afterward, but I think that would be fantastic if we could get the lifeguard at maybe the next council meeting, because that was pretty amazing, and we'd be very happy to recognize him publicly for it.
I was hoping for a reenactment.
Can I tell a real?
You get to go into the water.
Can I tell a quick story on that really quick? And I'm sorry if I'm taking up a minute, but it's a time for a feel-good story. So I went to Hogue after he had been transported after his 2 rescues, and his family. He's a younger guy, so his mom and dad and sister-in-law are standing outside because he couldn't get into the hospital, but they let me in to see him. So he was explaining the whole story to me, and I stood over his bed and I showed him the text message from the mayor, and I said, the mayor sent a text that he's very proud of you and your efforts, and the city's very proud of you, and just wanted you to see this. And he said, I'm just glad that kid's alive. So
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty touching. You'll hear him say he was just doing his job, and he was, but it was pretty heroic.
I have a question in addition to that. I actually have a couple of things, but so when we have extremely high surf like that and we have the black ball out, are people supposed to be surfing during that time? And what kind of risk does that put our lifeguards at if they're surfing under extreme situations?
So those are two different questions,
Yeah.
because when black ball's up, they are not allowed to surf. So hard boards are not allowed to be used when black ball is up. However, what we'll do is we'll put the green and yellow and red flags up, and the red flag means dangerous conditions. And the lifeguards will advise them of dangerous rip currents, dangerous waves, dangerous conditions, but we don't prohibit them from going into the water. So in this case, they were just swimming. A lot of times they're just body surfing.
Yeah. So those videos we saw of those conditions that were very impressive to see the surfers, but so if one of them was in a precarious situation, then our lifeguard would have to go into that sort of surf in order to save them.
Correct.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder when you are making the choice to go into dangerous conditions, you're not just putting yourself in risk.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, when you finish I have a question after this is finished.
Well, I was just going to wrap it up with, it was obviously a busy 4th of July weekend. With the beaches closed, I think that helped minimize some of the exposure with the people in the water with those big waves, but we had the unprecedented flooding. We had this 40-foot sailboat come ashore that had 6 people on it, and trying to get ambulances and paramedics and police officers and everybody out to the sand that was already flooded was quite the challenge. We started that as an MCI, but it only resulted in 1 patient being transported. The next night, on 4th of July night, a 25-foot powerboat missed the entrance to the harbor and landed on the shore of CDM, so it was a pretty eventful weekend, even without the people.
It's 2020. Miss
2020.
Dixon has a...
Well, actually, I regret that I didn't say this at the beginning when we were doing our announcements. I see Mr. Webb sitting there, so combined with Public Works and our lifeguards, 4th of July was a tumultuous weekend due to natural conditions with a high surf, high swells, and the flooding that occurred. I just want to publicly say, I should have said this at the beginning at the announcement period, appreciation to Public Works. They got the overnight on Friday night and Saturday morning, got the beaches, re-bermed, new berms, repositioned, and preventing any flooding for the next night on Saturday night. And also for the police, all of our public safety were out Friday night on the flooding that took place on the peninsula. So I'm very grateful. And in addition to it was a good thing, frankly, the beaches were closed, because getting that repair work done on Saturday was made far easier because of virtually empty beaches. But the amazing work of Public Works, to get the barricades up, get the beach new berms installed, the utilities department, so Micah and Dave's team and our lifeguards and our police. It was like D-Day on the 4th of July in Newport Beach, and I just want to commend all of our public safety teams and departments for really pulling together and working long, long hours with the heavy equipment, starting in the middle of the night, flooding, opening the valves, doing all that needs to be done. There was just a lot going on Friday night and the 4th of July, so I just want to publicly recognize all of our teams. And I'm sure, and then of course Grace was up all night dealing with this as well. So it just wasn't it was magnanimous what all of you did, magnificent and magnanimous, what everybody did to give of themselves and work to keep our community functioning on a busy holiday weekend. And thank goodness the beaches were closed on the 4th of July. I don't know how you all would have done it. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I agree with that 100%. And I know Chief Lewis and I kind of a little more high profile with the officers and lifeguards and firefighters out on the beaches, but the unsung heroes back here with Dave Webb's crew was just amazing what they pulled off over that weekend.
Mr. Avery.
Yeah, I was just struck that the night the boat went on the beach, full moon was clear. I don't know how they wound up in the surf, but actually I asked them. There were a couple that were standing there and they had towels with them, and they were obviously come from the boat, and they just said no comment, which I thought was revealing in itself. But I was really impressed because it was. There were all those people were out there that night, and you know, the full moon was doing its thing, boats on the beach, and there's just sort of this. You could feel sort of there was excitement in the air, and people were everywhere, and I just thought that our police and fire just did a great job of keeping calm, keeping everybody, you know, mellow, and just bending a little bit to kind of, you know, just let folks, you know, disperse if they were listening at all. And it was an extraordinary night out there, and the response of the units was really something. It's I'm always impressed with the reserve that our safety folks have when we have a situation like that, with a lot of the public out there, and you've got young people and old people aren't listening, and some people are, and it's just random. But just in the face of it, this very steady presence, just kind of slowly pushing, working, everything moving around, and dealing with it, but certainly not causing any kind of aggravation amongst everybody out there, because no one was out there trying to start trouble, really, from what I could see. I was out there, but just that presence to not overreact in those moments, and that's what struck me. Thank you.
Awesome. Anything else?
End of report.
All right. Thank you very much.
It wasn't the end of the report. I have 30 more seconds. So I visited all the facilities today. The Newport Pier with the A's that are in week 4 now. Marina Park with the B's, which are the second oldest kids, and this is what you see here is down in the Balboa Junior Guards building. Those are the C's and the D's, the little kids. And you can see the little flags that all the instructors put out for their little standing areas. They had the temperature thermometer to get them in the morning when they were checking in to give their name. They found their age. They found their leaders today, their instructors. So today was the busy day, and that's how we dealt with it. Now moving forward, they have different little spots to meet in, so which is going to work out really, really nicely, I think, up at Marina Park and down by the Balboa Pier. So they spread all the way down the beach once they got past this check-in procedure. But that, I just wanted you to get a visual of what that looked like there. It went really well. It was smooth. It seemed like everybody had a good time. The weather was perfect. So we're happy it's finally happening.
Great. Yeah, Ms. Brenner.
Jeff, could I just ask you to tell the kids that they're supposed to be distancing and wearing masks on their way to junior guards as well? My daughter sent me pictures of both my grandchildren in the B and the D group with their friends going to junior guards, and they're all standing right next to each other without their masks on. So, and my grandmotherly, where are their masks? You know, so if you could just warn them that it's not just when they're at junior guards, that they really are supposed to be observing these habits sort of on a regular basis.
We'll keep working. Well, the instructors got them today, so now they become their summer instructors, and some of the messages
thank you so much for doing this.
Awesome.
Welcome.
All right.
We all know it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Anything else? No. Awesome. I'll just echo everybody's comments. Really, thank you for the really hard work across all departments on 4th of July weekend. So it's a big deal. It really is. And yeah, let's make sure we get our lifeguard in here for the next meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Chief. All right. We'll go to public comment on this item. Any public comment? Any calls on this item? All right. Hi, go ahead.
Hello.
Yep, go ahead.
But Will's talking.
Hi, yes, you can go ahead.
Yes, hi. Yes, hi. So, good evening again. It's Dr. Susan Skinner. And I wanted to throw out a few more facts for you that there have been, in late June, there were about 200 positive cases per day in Orange County. That number's up to about 1,000. In late June, there were about 350 hospitalizations, and that number is now up to about 650 hospitalizations. And I'd actually like to correct another misconception, is I didn't actually hear Mr. Muldoon speaking after I talked, but apparently he has a misconception that I'm a therapist. I wanted to share with him that I am a physician. That actually probably explains why you address me as Mrs. Skinner and not Dr. Skinner. And for those that are listening I'd like to actually give my credentials in the hopes that that will encourage more people to wear masks and social distance. My education is Stanford University undergraduate, Baylor College of Medicine for my medical school, UCLA for my residency. I was the chief of neurology for 19 years at Kaiser Permanente. So I know a few things. And I'm hopeful that people listening to this will make a choice to wear masks and social distance for the public good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other calls on that one? Yeah, and just rounding that out, it's probably worth noting we have seen a substantial rise in the last 30 days. I know there's a lot of discussion on what that means, but it's probably worth noting over the last 30-day period, the two largest being Santa Ana and Anaheim, of course, have seen Santa Ana's seen 3,116 new cases in the last 30 days. Anaheim's seen 2,919. Surrounding cities around us. Huntington Beach has seen an increase of 856 new cases. Costa Mesa, 637 new cases. Newport Beach has seen an increase in 450 cases. So I do encourage everyone to be careful, be cautious, and treat this thing with the seriousness that it justifies, which it justifies quite a bit with rising hospitalization numbers. So let's see if we can turn that back around, get our businesses back open, and keep moving forward. So I look forward to finding out what Newport Mesa Unified School District does tonight, though. They have a meeting that's around the same time as we have, and I'd like to know what they plan on doing with schools going back into session in about a month. So we'll find out.
We should send Chief Boyles over there. Manage all those junior guards.
That's right. Yeah, actually, it's probably worth mentioning. The school district did ask for at least some city participation, so Laura Detweiler's been lent over to kind of try to help out with that process. So I just want to say thank you to Laura for, helping out with how they're going to work. I imagine actually outside of junior guards, Laura is probably the person who understands the most how children can interact and work within spaces. So just wanted to say thank you to Laura for that effort. All right, real quick before we get to the last item, I should probably just real quickly mention, at the beginning of this year, I asked everybody to come up with some volunteers that they'd like to recognize, and the plan, of course, was to bring them in and have meetings and celebrate people. I will say that's clearly not going to happen. I think that I don't anticipate inviting the public back into our city council meetings for a while, unfortunately, if I'm reading the tea leaves on things. So for our fellow council members, I still think we ought to celebrate volunteers. We're seeing so much good volunteerism, even in what we're going through right now. So what we can do, if you'd like, and this is just an offer to everyone, if you'd like, what we can do is, if you'd like to recognize a volunteer with a proclamation, let me know who it is. We can schedule a time to go out and present the proclamation. I'll go with any council member anywhere in the city, and we'll do a social distance picture and keep recognizing people, and then you can show it at the beginning of council meetings going forward, because I really do think we ought to be finding some silver linings in light of everything that's going on. So that's an offer I'm making to everybody. I think I challenge you to find 5. I think less is probably going to be reasonable, but I would just suggest if you have folks that you'd like to schedule a time to present volunteer proclamations on behalf of, I'd be more than happy to accommodate that. So with that, Madam Clerk.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any such motions? All right, seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you.